Hello and welcome to Thirsty Thursday. Today we have a guest with us on the show. Say hi to the people, Dion.
Hi, everyone. Thanks
We'll
for having
quick.
me on the show.
Well, thank you for joining me. You're gonna be my guinea pig as we figure out this live situation, and
Sounds fun.
hopefully do something decent with it. So Dion Vaz is Global Marketing Director at SSON, and she's a friend of Thirsty Thursday and the Thirst List. We often talk about how we have lots of people who send us stories saying, "Hey, did you see this? Have you heard of it?" And that's kind of one of the ways that we stay on top of the news. So um, thank you for joining me on this, Dion, and sort of like chatting. So should we get
Yeah.
started with the first one, which is
Mhm.
as you know, the news cycle has been heavy the last little while, and we've seen individuals and brands reacting to the situation in Afghanistan, which is that now the Taliban has, taken control again at exactly the point when the US troops were about to exit. So there are a couple of brands who've been contributing in various ways towards like fundraising and rescue and aid efforts. And one of the brands that probably did it well or has started to do it well is Airbnb. Do you want to quickly lay
Mhm.
that out for the people?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so basically what Airbnb did is they're paying for 20,000 Afghan refugees to be housed in their host homes.
Mm-hmm.
And basically I think this is really good, like really on brand for Airbnb. Their mission statement is basically to create a world where anyone can belong anywhere. They've been doing things putting people in disaster stricken places, or like for Sandy or the Pulse nightclub shooting, for example. They've always stepped up and helped out the community. So I think it's super on brand. What about you? What do you think?
No, I think it's pretty cool. This whole effort is, like you said, it's certainly something that they're not just pulling it out of the hat to get some publicity out of it. It looks like there's
Mhm.
some depth to the thing. There's ways in which they're calling for the help. I did think that at first glance when it was released, that press release, people were sort of doing that same thing, which is like rush out with the story, and there wasn't like all of the details in it. I would have liked to have seen like a bit more depth in terms of, like, as we read, you're like, oh, they're doing this, okay, great, like how, and then what happens next and whatever. And I think when you release these things which are purpose driven, I understand they're always like urgent,
Quick.
but
Yeah.
it's still worth sort of like putting down the details so that people don't have to go like seek it out. So that said, I thought, yeah, this is a great effort. There's people who are, I think there's a couple of pieces that we can link to on it. So that was cool to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also, I don't know if you heard about the story about Quentin Quarantino,
Hmm.
who's basically essentially a meme artist. And he started in like March 2020. And because he grew such a large following, he started doing, social, things for social good. And he also launched a campaign for Afghanistan, and within the first 5 hours, within the first 24 hours, he raised $5 million
Oh
from his
wow.
followers, which I thought was really exciting. And yesterday, the first flight came back from Afghanistan, basically, exporting people out of there, getting people out of there. So
Hmm.
I think that's really cool um, to hear about people doing things like this on Instagram.
Yeah, that's really cool. That story, as well as a whole bunch of others. I'm just going to quickly share my screen over here. This is a list of GoFundMe campaigns that are verified, which I think is a cool step from the platform itself. Because I think in most cases, people, when this sort of crisis and disaster strikes, and you want to help, a really good way to help is just put your money where your mouth is, right? And I know that people have used hashtags like put your dollars where your hashtags are and those sorts of things to just
Yeah.
get people to like stop talking about it and start doing something. So this curated list of verified sources, I think it's certainly a priority for me when I'm like, ooh, is this going to go to the actual sources or not?
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So next on our list of things that we wanted to talk about is this segment that we are beginning to, keep going with. And it's interesting that we keep coming back to it every week, because every week there's some sort of news on it, and we call it like the podcast wars. So this week in the news headlines is Spotify once again. It's almost getting stale, Dion. It's like either Spotify or Apple. But that said, this time around, it's Spotify. They have opened up podcast subscriptions to all creators in the US. So previously, it was sort of running in a beta form. And some creators had access to it, but as of yesterday, I believe it is now available to all creators in the US. And sort of some of the highlight points of it. The first of it is that it's now everyone, isn't that FOMO, like invite only, which I feel like we've seen a lot of that happen with Clubhouse and many other things. It's none of that. It's like, okay, we tested this works, let's go. So that was interesting. There was also a fair amount of detail provided on the pricing, right? And you were talking
Yeah.
about that.
I, I thought that was interesting that, they first tested like a couple of different price points.
Hmm.
I feel like I'm echoing. Um, a couple of different price points, but then they realized that creators wanted more flexibility and, now offered them 20 different options. So I really like that. I think they offer the ability, even though they own Anchor, the ability to use RSS feeds. So I like that they've taken into consideration the creator, because I think that's important. The easier it
Yeah.
is to use, the more people that are going to start using it. So smart.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. So that's what's happening on the podcast wars front, and not far from there. While we're sort of staying in that creator economy, we had some news this week from TikTok about how they are expanding their e-commerce efforts, and in a partnership with Spotify, they are now offering creators the ability to sort of like affiliate with brands. So that
Yeah.
idea of shopping online, where you're like, okay, this person's wearing the following things, or this is what is in the background of the person, and then you're able to like buy within the platform. The goal obviously is to keep people on the platform for longer, but then there's a user experience level which makes it easy, which I am sure is
Yeah, I
appreciated.
love it. I really enjoy the Instagram, in-app e-commerce experience, because I think it doesn't, affect my experience with the social platform itself, and I as well. It's there if I want it, but it's not in my face where I'm like I have to kind of avoid it. So
Right.
I really like that. I think they've done it quite well.
Yeah, I think so too. There's a hashtag again. There's always a hashtag, Dion. It's like TikTok made me buy it is sort of the hashtag that was being used among the creators that were doing it. But I think this is like interesting. I mean, we've been talking a lot about where things are going, and how creation is evolving, and how influence is used. And I think this is a good little bunch of stories to be like, what, the creators, you do need to cater to them as things go. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
hmm.
Speaking of that, actually, that's a good segue into the next story, which is, you need to think about the creators, right? And it seems like this week, OnlyFans did not do that. If you know what I'm talking about, the backstory is they basically said that they would ban any sort of sexually explicit content on the
Hmm.
platform, and I don't think they really thought about who their audience or creators were, because majority of it is actually on the platform for that reason. And obviously there was an uproar, people leaving the platform, and then I think OnlyFans really realized that this was a mistake, and they actually backtracked on their decision.
Right.
um, and again, like they backtracked on the decision, and then basically gave a really sorry apology,
Yeah.
which was basically that they stand for inclusion, they will provide a home for all creators, but they actually didn't 2 days ago.
Right. And then there was a lot of uproar on the subject, which was like, when for the first time in my life, I'm feeding my family, and I have a savings account and whatever. And
Mhm.
who are you to sort of judge this? And again, it goes back to that integrity versus who's putting the money, like the funding. So there's a bunch of
Mhm.
banks who decided this is not cool, but there's like impacts to that whole thing. So it's interesting. Brands taking a stand. I'm always all about that, and I think
Yeah.
it's super interesting. So on the again, one more little seg there about people taking a stand,
Mhm.
and this time a personal brand, Padma Lakshmi um, took on a somebody who had opinions on on Indian food. Tell us what
Yeah.
happened there, Dion.
Yeah, absolutely. So Padma Lakshmi is an Indian author, activist, a model, and I think a TV presenter as well.
Right,
And she basically called out the Washington Post, a columnist there who was basically wrote this column that said, "You can't make me eat these foods."
right,
And in it, he sort of spoke about like one of the many things that he spoke about was the fact that he doesn't like Indian food. Now, that's not the part that offended me or probably Padma either, but it was that it was sort of lazy, racist, and like it wasn't really factual.
right,
Um, he basically said the Indian food is the only ethnic cuisine in the world insanely based on one spice, which is curry, which is curry is not even a spice, for starters. And so, yeah, she basically took off on him on Instagram, trying to give him a little bit of a lesson. And then she shamelessly, not shamelessly, nicely, I think, plugged in her book, The Encyclopedia of Spices and Herbs, which I thought was a great way of newsjacking.
right. It's true. It was really, I've got the picture up over here. It says you clearly need an education on spice and flavor. I suggest you start with my book. So, on some occasion, we have people ask questions around how do you, how do you decide what do you want to take a stance on, right? And then our answer is often like it's got to be your pillars of communication. So obviously, as someone who has a book on the encyclopedia of spices, she's super qualified to tell this dude to like
Yeah.
what he's talking about is horseshit. And he had a follow up, by the way, in which he said, "Oh, after I got all the blowback and the hate, I went to this restaurant called Rustica in DC, which is apparently the best. And then I ate it again, and guess what? It was swimming in the stuff that I hate." I'm like, it sounds like you don't know how to order good Indian food, bruh. You know,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he posted an apology yesterday on Twitter as well, which wasn't again a really good apology, and basically said I shouldn't have, talked about the whole like all the cuisine. I should have just spoken about one particular dish or something like that.
yeah.
Um, Always fun times.
Yes, and in the last sort of story of the week, then this is a good week. We really had to take some out because we're like, oh goodness, are we going to fit all of it? But this week, the last story of the week is a story from right here in the hood for us in Toronto. So the we are about to have a new TV series. The series is called Sort of, which is created by a local artist who is the first queer, South Asian, Muslim, the real diversity that something like Toronto represents is sort of like it's interesting to me that this is coming up.
Yeah.
I've often told you, Dion, that like what that's the way the city looks, and to me it's really cool that that's being translated into mainstream television. So,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah,
for,
exactly.
and for those of us who live here, it's full of all of these locations that you're going to recognize, including my old hood, High Park. So I'm looking forward to that.
Of course, Toronto took the lead with this, so that's interesting.
Really cool. Well, thank you for virtual joining us here in Toronto. That's a wrap on the stories of this week. Hopefully, you got some inspiration from those as well, Dion.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. And love the segment. So thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. Bye.
Bye.